headlines. North Korea fires 2 short-range missiles into the East Sea as South Korea and the United States kick off their annual joint military exercises. President Park Geun-hye arrives in Kuwait for the first leg of a 4-nation tour of the Middle East that's expected to focus heavily on cooperation in energy and construction projects. And Samsung unpacks its newest Galaxy smartphones armed with wireless charging batteries and a mobile payment system. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News. Thanks for tuning in. Coming to you live from Seoul, I am Kang Chery. The two Koreas have exchanged what they usually do around this time of year. North Korea has fired missiles in reaction to the South's annual military exercises with the U.S., which began today. And Seoul was quick to condemn Pyongyang's hostile reaction. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
South Korea's defense ministry condemned North Korea on Monday for firing 2 short-range missiles into the East Sea earlier in the day, calling it a violation of UN resolutions, and warned Pyongyang that it will move swiftly to counter any future provocations. The 2 missiles are presumed to have been short-range Scud missiles, with an approximate range of 500 kilometers. They were fired into the East Sea from the western port city of Nampo. The ministry says the missile firing is probably the North's way of expressing its opposition to the South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises, which kicked off on the same day. Over 10,000 South Korean troops and around 12,000 American troops are taking part in the annual exercise, which consists of 2 parts. Part 1 is the 2-week-long Key Resolve exercise, a computerized command post exercise aimed at enhancing the combined forces' operations and strategy. Part 2 is the 8-week-long Full Eagle field training exercise that aims to enhance interoperability between Korea and the U.S. across all branches of the military during wartime. The annual exercises, which date back to the early 1970s, have long been a source of aggravation for the North, with Pyongyang calling the drills a rehearsal for a northward invasion. Seoul and Washington say the exercises are defensive in nature. Last year, North Korea protested the drills by launching a series of roughly 90 Scud missiles and long-range rockets. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Senior diplomats from UN member countries, including the two Koreas, are expected to have a heated debate this week in Geneva over North Korea's human rights abuses, and that won't be all on the agenda. Connie Kim has more.
The two Koreas are likely to have a heated debate in Geneva this week over North Korea's dire human rights situation and the regime's nuclear program. North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Soo-yong will deliver a keynote speech at the UN Human Rights Council on Tuesday, during which he's expected to condemn the adoption of a UN resolution that calls for the North Korean leadership be referred to the International Criminal Court. Pyongyang has been demanding its human rights record be expunged after North Korean defector Shin Dong-hyuk admitted to falsifying parts of his story about his experiences in a prison camp. However, South Korea will refuse to budge on the issue, as Seoul's Vice Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol is expected to call for follow-up measures to the UN human rights resolution during his speech.
Human rights is a very sensitive issue for the North Korean regime. It seems as though North Korea will use all means and efforts to dodge the issue.
The clash is likely to continue during talks over Pyongyang's nuclear program at the Conference on Disarmament. Echoing his comments from the previous UN address, the North Korean minister will almost certainly defend his country's nuclear program by stressing it's necessary for national security.
The nuclear issue will be resolved if and when the threat to our sovereignty and right to life is removed. That means the termination of Washington's hostile policy toward our country.
South Korea's diplomat will likely call for greater international efforts to push the North to give up its nuclear arms. This will mark the first time for a top North Korean diplomat to address the Human Rights Council and the Disarmament Conference. Experts say Pyongyang is desperate to counter the swell of international criticism over its human rights abuses and make the case for its widely condemned nuclear weapons program. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
A Japanese historian has recently come out with a book on the forced mobilization of Koreans during Japan's colonial rule. Author Yasuto Takeuchi told Yonhap News that his book is to coincide with the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Korea and Japan, and that he hopes it will help restore the dignity of those who've suffered. His book, published about a month ago, contains personal information of over 10,000 Koreans who were subject to forced mobilization from 1939 to 45. Takeuchi estimates that roughly 1/3 or 1/5 of the Koreans that were killed after hard labor or military service. President Park Geun-hye has arrived in Kuwait on the first leg in a 4-day trip to the Middle East. This is the first time in 8 years that a Korean president is visiting this country. Economic cooperation with this region beyond the usual oil and construction projects is topping her agenda. Our Choi Yoo-sun follows this report from Kuwait.
Since Korean businesses started winning construction projects in the Middle East in the 1970s, the region has become Korea's largest overseas market for plant construction, generating nearly 40% of total orders received. Korea also depends heavily on oil imports from the Middle East. During her trip, President Park Geun-hye will seek a more diversified and deeper economic cooperation with the region to bring about a new growth engine for the Korean economy. Speaking to reporters prior to departing Seoul, the president said that in preparation for the post-oil era, the Middle East is seeking to diversify its oil-centered industries and improve quality of living through developments in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. She says this fits perfectly in line with her 3-year economic plan to spur growth through innovation and structural reforms.
이번에 이제 제2중동의 붐을 일으키자 하는 것은 그 중동 지역하고 또 그 국가들하고 한국하고 또 이렇게 인연이 깊은 것 같아요. 우리 다양한 그 기업들이나 이런 데서 가가지고 서로 협력을 할 일이 많아졌죠.
So when President Park meets Middle Eastern leaders this week, she will discuss expanding Korea and the region's economic cooperation to include healthcare, IT, education, and culture. The cooperative relationship will also develop from simply providing the region with labor and infrastructure to sharing knowledge and launching joint ventures. President Park is scheduled for back-to-back meetings with Kuwait's Amir, parliamentary speaker, and prime minister on Monday. While economic cooperation will likely dominate their discussions, President Park also plans to seek Kuwait's support behind their North Korea and unification policies. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News, Kuwait City.
Samsung has unveiled its latest Galaxy smartphones. They're armed with wirelessly charging batteries and a mobile payment system. Will they save Samsung from this cutthroat competition in the smartphone business? Our Shin Se-min has this report.
This is Galaxy S6 and Galaxy S6 Edge.
These are the most advanced powerful smartphones in the world, with the capabilities no other phone can match. But that's not all. To use a technical engineering term, they also look really cool.
Could this be a game changer for Samsung Electronics? The specifications certainly do seem to make a strong case for that. Introduced Sunday at the Samsung Unpacked event ahead of the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, the brand new Samsung Galaxy handsets have a better grip on both design and composition. The Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge, which comes with the curved display, sport a dazzling glass and lightweight metal architecture. Both have a faster processor, a better camera, and most importantly, a fast-charging battery. Samsung ditched a replaceable battery from the S5 and added a wireless feature.
They were the first brand ever to introduce wireless charging that's built in.
It's also much faster. The new Galaxy phones only need a 10-minute charge to offer 4 hours of battery life. Totaling it up, Samsung says it'll take the S6 roughly half the time to charge as the iPhone 6. The phones are also loaded with a mobile payment system called Samsung Pay. Like its Apple counterpart, Samsung Pay uses NFC technology. But unlike Apple, it also has magnetic secure transmission technology developed by Lupe, which allows users to make mobile payments at most places where plastic cards are already accepted. With the flashy new handset Duo, the company is hoping to lift its flagging sales and climb back to the top of the global smartphone market after having lost out to Apple last year. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Korea has posted a current account surplus every month for almost 3 years now. The Bank of Korea says January surplus amounted to some $7 billion. Although this is $80 million short from the month before, Korea is on path to meeting and breaking its previous surplus streak of 3 years and 2 months, a record set back in 1986. It's not all good news, though, as a drop in exports coupled with a bigger drop in imports is driving the current account surplus trend at the moment. Exports dropped 10% in January from the month last year, while imports plunged almost 17% on the back of falling global oil prices. Korea's January industrial output dropped by its biggest margin in almost 2 years. Output across the board plunged 1.7% compared to the month before. The government cites a base effect as the reason for the drop, since December production in the mining and manufacturing sectors shot up by the most in more than 5 years. Koreans' tendency to spend less the month before the Lunar New Year holiday was also a factor, since the holiday fell in February this year. Output in the mining and manufacturing sectors in particular dropped 3.7% in January from a month ago, falling the most since the global financial crisis in 2008. Mobile banking has made our lives much more convenient, but many still struggle with the crucial first step in gaining access to their account online, which is authentication. Starting this year, though, that process could be as simple and easy as putting your credit card onto your smartphone. Reports say Korean financial institutions are preparing to launch this new method, which uses near-field communication technology within the first half of the year. If all goes as planned, people won't have to deal with the hassle of verifying each transaction using a security code from their bank. Whether you're a fan of this idea or not, implantable ID chips are no longer the stuff from science fiction, at least not for those working at an office complex in Sweden. Chip manufacturers assure us that these devices do no harm to the body, but there are still concerns. Our Kim Min-ji has the details.
Forget your keys or leave your company ID card at home? That's no longer a problem for workers at Epicenter, a high-tech office complex in Sweden, as workers can now access things with just a wave of their hand. Their key is a 12mm radio frequency identification chip implant.
It felt pretty scary, but at the same time it felt very modern, very 2015.
Employees with the chip implant can get into the office and unlock the photocopier. They can also exchange business cards with people they meet by swiping a hand over their smartphone. Although the chip's functions are limited at this stage, the CEO of the complex expects much more.
Payments is, I think, one area. I think also for healthcare reasons, that you can sort of communicate with your doctor and you can get data on what you eat and sort of what your physical status is.
The chip implant is optional for workers in the office complex. The manufacturer says it poses no harm to the human body and will not set off metal detectors and is also safe during MRI scans. But while it may seem innovative and tech-savvy, some have voiced concerns that it could be an invasion of privacy and pose a threat to a person's security. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Korea is planning to invest $285 million this year to enhance the safety of spent nuclear fuel, a 7.7% increase from last year. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning says the money will be spent on nuclear energy development, radiation technology development, and enhancing the safety of small and medium-sized nuclear reactors. The government plans to continue its development of dry reprocessing methods for spent fuel, in which 95% of reprocessed fuel can be recycled. The ministry says it also hopes to come up with plans to replace the country's aging nuclear reactors. Korea is clamping down on gun control in light of last week's fatal shootings. The government and ruling party on this Monday agreed on measures to require GPS tracking for all guns and to ban individuals from possessing small air rifles or live ammunition. Currently, gun owners must store their guns at any police station. Under the new measures, they will have to be kept at a station near the gun owner's registered address or hunting ground. More than 160,000 guns are registered in Korea, but the monitoring system has only one police officer assigned to about 500 guns, which critics say is too much. Buongiorno, or good morning. That's what most of the works by Italian artist Novello Finotti would say if they could speak. His abstract sculptures that celebrate life are here in Seoul. Our Imuni takes us to the exhibition.
A baby in its mother's womb is a precious symbol of life. This baby is already leaving an imprint on its mother. Verona-born artist Novello Finotti is praised globally for his approach to art, using sculpture to capture life's special occasions and the unique aspects of humanity.
Through a boundless imagination, dreams can embody the hopes of a father. It carries the message of not wanting to wake his precious sleeping daughter.
Finotti takes a modern approach to his work, creating abstract sculptures that echo our world, but also suggest a different part of our lives.
Humans are born on Earth and are reborn again. I wanted to create that flow.
This leg, with a jutting arm holding a pair of lips, is not something you'll see in reality, but it represents a new, mysterious part of our world, a part that Finotti wants to explore. His abstract modern works have captured the imaginations of people from around the world, and now they're catching the attention of Koreans. Buongiorno is Italian for good morning. And that's just what Italian sculptor Novello Finotti's works convey, each sculpture embracing a cherished part of our lives. Lee Myun-hee, ARIRANG News.
Tens of thousands of people marched through the heart of Moscow over the weekend to mourn Russia's opposition leader Boris Nemtsov, who was shot dead in front of the Kremlin last Friday. For more, Paul Lee is joining us from the News Center. Paul, this is a shocking murder, one that's drawn fierce public backlash, with many of President Putin's critics blaming him directly for the shooting.
That's right. Up to 70,000 have called for justice for Nemtsov's murder, according to protest organizers. Officials are investigating the case, but given the political situation in Russia, there are those feelers that are responsible, but those responsible will never be found. This as local media are declaring that this killing will have profound repercussions for Russia at home and abroad. Our Son Jung-in reports.
Tens of thousands of people gathered in central Moscow on Sunday carrying Russian flags and marching alongside the river Moskva. The streets were filled with protesters holding placards that said, "I am not afraid," in memory of Boris Nemtsov, who was shot dead in the shadow of the Kremlin on Friday evening. Meanwhile, CCTV footage has emerged showing the moment of the shooting. The poor resolution video shows two people believed to be Nemtsov and his female companion walking across a bridge in central Moscow before a snow truck moves behind the couple to obscure the view of the shooting.
This is not a mere murder, but an act of terror. This is politically motivated, and we need to find the truth behind this terror attack.
Police believe there are 2 suspects involved and have expanded their investigation in search for them. The shooting happened 2 days before Nemtsov was to speak at a major anti-government rally. He was working on a report presenting evidence that he believed proved Russia was directly involved in the conflict in Ukraine, despite official denials from Moscow that it has supplied separatists with troops and weapons.
Boris declared that he would reveal persuasive evidence about the involvement of Russian armed forces in Ukraine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has described the killing as a provocation and pledged to do everything to find and prosecute the killers and punish them. However, there are fears those responsible will never be found. Nemtsov's supporters believe shadowy elements in the Russian government were behind the killing of one of Putin's most prominent critics. 손정인, ARIRANG News.
And shifting now to the United States, U.S. Israeli Prime Minister, that is Benjamin Netanyahu, arrived in Washington ahead of his official address before Congress. This visit has frayed relations with the Obama administration as it was left out in the dark. What did the U.S. Secretary of State have to say about this diplomatic snub?
Well, ahead of his arrival, Chery stressed Netanyahu was welcome to address U.S. lawmakers and that relations between the U.S. and Israel have never been stronger. But he did say it was odd that the White House was not informed and warned against inciting a, quote, political football. Netanyahu had accepted an invitation by Republican House Speaker John Boehner to speak before a joint session of Congress on Tuesday. There he will make his case against an international agreement on Iran's nuclear program. This as Chery heads to Geneva with the hope of finalizing a nuclear pact with Iran ahead of a March 24th deadline. The Israeli Prime Minister has been adamantly opposed to such a deal, instead pushing for more economic sanctions on Tehran to curb its nuclear ambitions.
And turning to China, Prince William from Britain has kicked off his first trip to the mainland. The goodwill visit appears to be strictly business and comes as both countries are enjoying improved relations.
Well, the prince is definitely being given a warm welcome during his 4-day trip, which began on Sunday. This as the second in line to the British throne says he's looking forward to helping strengthen ties between the UK and China. On Monday, Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks with the young prince at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. During that meeting, William extended an official invitation from Queen Elizabeth for a state visit to Britain, with a stay in Buckingham Palace reportedly in the works. The Duke of Cambridge later toured the Forbidden City and is expected to make stops in Shanghai to promote Britain's brand image and business connections. The visit also marks the first for a senior member of the British royal family in almost 30 years.
And finally, the American space company SpaceX has successfully launched 2 satellites into Earth's orbit. Give us the details of this mission.
Well, Space Exploration Technologies, or SpaceX, said its Falcon 9 rocket blasted off from Cape Canaveral Sunday night, marking its 16th launch. The 68-meter rocket was carrying communication satellites from the Asia Broadcasting System and the French telecom provider Eutelsat. It's the first time the private space company, founded by billionaire Elon Musk, has embarked on a dual launch of satellites into geosynchronous orbit. Chery?
All right, Paul, thank you so much for those stories, and we will see you again in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather forecast. We kicked off the week with higher than normal levels of yellow dust, mostly in the capital regions, and a heads up as more is set to move in from China tomorrow evening. But besides the dust, it is mostly clear skies nationwide, but it's shaping up to be a different story for tomorrow. So up to 7 centimeters of snow is expected for parts of Gangwon-do province, and about 1 centimeter should drop here in the central regions, including Seoul. Looking ahead, numbers will stay above seasonal averages through tomorrow morning, but things will take a dip tomorrow evening. And do keep in mind that strong cold winds blowing along the western coast should make conditions feel much chillier than the actual numbers. On to tomorrow's readings. The daytime high here in the capital hits 6, Daegu 10, Busan hits 8. Meanwhile, Jeju reaches up to 12, Dokdo hits 8, Mount Kumgang -1. Those are the updates we're following on this Monday evening. I'll be back with more after 10.
Thank you very much, Park Geun-hye, and that does it for this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.